Welcome back to the Wealth Builder podcast. I'm your host, Nick Donato, financial advisor at Guidance Financial. Receiving an inheritance can bring up a lot of mixed emotions. On one hand, there's gratitude. On the other hand, there's grief. You've lost someone important, and suddenly you're faced with decisions, many decisions that you'd never have wanted to make in the past. Many people worry about getting it wrong. They don't want to waste the money, they don't want to make a mistake, or do something their loved one wouldn't have wanted. They want to honor that legacy, but they're also vulnerable, often overwhelmed, and unsure where to start. Today's episode is about exactly that. Where do you start when you receive an inheritance? Especially in your 30s or 40s, when you might already have a mortgage, young kids, and competing financial priorities. To help unpack this, I'm joined by Paul Benson. Together, we'll walk through the first steps, common mistakes, and how to make thoughtful decisions without rushing, so you can protect yourself, your family, and the legacy that you've been left. Thanks for joining me again today on a bit of a maybe somber episode around inheritance, but thanks for coming in.
Hey, thanks, Nick. Yeah, good fun. And gee, I'm on back-to-back episodes of Wealth Builder. Yeah, first time ever. That's good. It makes me feel important. Thank you.
No worries, no worries. So when it again, inheritance is very emotional time. Lots of different things to consider. So the first thing I'd say is once that happens, to just hit pause. Don't rush into any decisions. You know, feel your emotions and your grief, and don't jump into anything that you can't undo down the track if you do make the wrong decision because you're not in the right headspace.
Yeah, I think we talk about compounding and how important it is, but for just sitting on things for 3 months, 6 months, however long you need to just let the dust settle a bit, in the whole scheme of things, there's not a big financial cost to that. So yeah, totally agree. That's the definite first thing to do after an inheritance is just don't feel like it all has to be done tomorrow, right? Just chill out and give yourself a bit of opportunity to breathe.
Yeah, definitely. And, when you've got that clear headspace, then you can start thinking about your objectives and what you want to do with whatever you've been left, weighing up how you honor their legacy and what you should do to, get a step forward for yourself and your family potentially. Um, but rushing into things and making decisions that might be irreversible and, you know, cause a bit of detriment, is not the way, is not the place to start.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, we've paused. What do we do next, Nick?
Then we've got to, assess what we're receiving. So after, the will's been taken care of, the executors done their job, probate's potentially been granted, and we're set to receive this inheritance. We've got to see what it is. It could be property, could be shares, could be cash, could be a super payout. So just defining what I'm receiving as opposed to the other beneficiaries, and looking at what it is that we're getting, and then understanding the consequences when it comes to those assets.
And probably just another thing, just thinking about some clients I've worked with that have gone through this process too, is being realistic on the timing. Um, because sometimes the person who's passed away, they might have been sick for a long time in some instances. So they've passed away. but it's sort of been a while coming. And then it's okay. So you might have actually had a bit of time to reflect on, well, what am I going to do when this estate sorts itself out? But it can take longer than you think. I mean, really simple ones. Sometimes it just takes quite a while to get probate. But then I've had other clients who are recipients of wills where there's a business that needs to be sold, for instance, and that can take years.
Mm-hmm.
So probably just another thing, as you say, clarity on, well, what am I inheriting here? But perhaps also just like don't get ahead of yourself, and certainly you don't want to put the order in for the new car or something like that until the money's hit your bank account, because my experience is that often these things take longer than you would think.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I had one just recently, a lady where her mum had been in aged care for a long time. I think her mum lived to like 101 or something, right? So again, it wasn't unexpected. But she was relying on getting that money into superannuation. And of course, you've got to do that before you turn 75 years of age. And this one just took ages because there was a family trust involved. There's a few different complexities. And yeah, it caused her quite a lot of stress because she's like, oh my God, I don't think I'm going to be able to get it in super before I turn 75, and all these kind of stresses and pressures. So, yeah, just another consideration. Um, Things take longer than you expect, and
Yeah.
just don't get ahead of yourself, I guess.
Yeah, and on the family trust or business property as well is one that can take a while. And, if you're receiving half the property or all the property or whatever that is, you've got that decision of whether you keep it or whether you sell it, which would then dictate some sort of time frame. And if we do go down the path of selling it, obviously there's the real estate agent that gets involved and, settlement periods and whatnot. But from a higher point of view, there's potential capital gains tax consequences involved as well. If the person bought it pre 1985, there might not be too many of those around these days, but capital gains tax free. Then there's also another 2-year rule around, the person's primary residence if the deceased lived in it throughout their life or for a period of time. So there's lots of different consequences to consider other than timing. Um, that we've got to potentially have an allocation for some tax in there, depending upon what
Mm.
eventuates.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're the beneficiary, it's sorted out for you, but it could be that there's some tax applicable to a super payout as well. Um,
Mhm.
so again, I guess well, that at the very least circles back to, don't sort of mentally spend it until it's in your bank account, right? Because it might be a little bit different to what you expect. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
while we don't have an inheritance tax per se, there is capital gains tax that again potentially paid on the property or the shares, CBA shares, CSL shares, whatever shares you
Mm,
inherit, and super as well can be taxed, which is not very common knowledge if you're not a financial advisor potentially, but there's components within your super fund, and the taxable component can get taxed up to 17% if you're receiving the funds from parents as adult children. So there might be some tax that's applicable. Again, it gets all taken care of by the estate and the funds that are there, but what comes out to you at the end of the day might be less than what you expected because of this tax.
mhm. Mm. Yeah, no, great points. So Nick, okay, so people have, let's say it's all been processed. They've got their inheritance now, right? So what should they be doing?
Yep. My question is, what are your goals? Harping on goals again, but yeah, depends. What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? Would be my first question to someone, and my first thing that I would say about someone when considering an inheritance or a sum of money that they've come into.
Yeah, and I think just to build on that too, a couple of things I would, if you have a partner, include your partner, um, because, well, just so many of the goals are going to impact the other person in your life, if that's the situation that you're in, and if you're kind of making all these plans and, oh, here, I'm going to retire here and I'm going to do travel, or I'm going to blah, 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 move to the beach or something. If your partner's not on board, then that's not going to fly. So even though the inheritance is something that's come to you as an individual rather than perhaps the two of you as a couple, but nevertheless, the goals need to entail a conversation across the two of you. The other thing would be just to think about prioritization too, because like it might be, for instance, a common one, people get an inheritance, right? Well, I'm going to pay off the mortgage, right? That's if you've got a mortgage, that's a pretty common first step, right? But then they might have, well, I want to put some money aside to help the kids get into the property market later on, say. That'd come up a fair bit. And then they might have, I'd like to do a bit of travel, or like to buy a snazzy car or something like that. Well, you need to kind of go, right, well, what's the order of that? Because, the money that we're putting aside to help the kids into the property market is money that then isn't available to travel or to buy the nice car or the whatever other toy you want, right? So figure out the goals, do it with your partner if that's the situation that you're in, but then also spend a bit of time just, well, hang on, if we can't do all of these goals and we had to pick and choose, which ones would we choose? For people who have got the financial autonomy book that I wrote, there's a prioritization exercise in there, so you might you might be able to check that out if you want. But prioritization's also very important here, because often you've got an inheritance, and so that might enable you to do things that previously weren't on the cards, and so sometimes there can be a temptation to kind of really let the imagination run wild, which is great fun, and I'm all for it. But at some point, you've got to kind of go, well, okay, that would be awesome, but actually, what's the most important thing to me? And just sort of make sure that you at least get those things ticked off. So, yeah, that would be some thoughts. But I mean, beyond goals, Nick, what other things do you think people should be thinking about?
Yeah, on prioritization, before we move on, it's also a fine line. The person that's no longer here may have had a wish for that money to say, I'm giving you this inheritance. You need to go take that trip that we've always dreamed of you taking and go to Europe and spend 50K. Who knows what it is? So it's prioritizing, adding that into the prioritization list, so to speak. Do you honor their legacy and do what they've told you to do, or do part of what they've told you to do, or do you pay off the mortgage completely because it's a financial strain on you? So again, pausing and giving yourself to process the emotions is one way that'll help you be clearer on the priorities and the goals, but that's also a big one that people need to consider or do consider when it comes to these types of scenarios.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. What else you got?
Yeah, outside of that, I guess that the common ones we see are, building up an emergency fund, making sure they've got, a bit of some financial security behind them. They've come into this large sum of money or large inheritance, so building up an emergency fund to cover off things that might happen. We look at credit cards and personal loans. If someone's got themselves into a bit of a bad debt situation, that's definitely something as a financial advisor I'd say that should be prioritized, but depending on your scenario. But if the credit card's copping you 26% interest rate, it might be wise to reduce that or get rid of that.
Are there some cards that are that high these days, are they? I haven't looked recently.
Oh, that might have been a bit of an exaggeration there.
Well, in any event, they're high, right? So, yeah, 100% I'm on board. If you got stuff like that floating around, you want that at the top of the priority list.
Or maybe 12% might be more realistic.
I wouldn't, yeah. I haven't looked for a while, but 20s, I wouldn't surprise me. 26 sounds extreme, but who knows? Interest rates are going up, Nick. Maybe by the time people are listening to this, they may well be 26%.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Yeah. And then it's again around the goals. What do we want to do? Do we have some big expenses coming up? Is there a house upgrade, to move into a bigger house? Are we inheriting a house and going to sell our current one and move into that? Is there some renovations we need to do, holidays, buy the fancy car? What is it that we want to do? And, we help clients with that, projecting things out to see if it's affordable, if we can do it on our current asset base, our current salary, or those types of things. So we can help provide a bit of peace of mind that, yes, we can go on the holiday and it's not going to financially affect us too much. Or, yeah, we can upgrade the house and our mortgage repayments will increase slightly, or those types of things.
The
Um,
so I was just going to say the other thing along those lines that modeling is often people like if they've received an inheritance and at this point their children are adults, so probably more the clients I look after than the clients you look after, but often they might want to pass it on to the next generation because maybe by that stage they're already reasonably financially secure. So then there is modeling around, well, gee, if you give X amount on to your son, daughter, uh, am I still going to be okay? I'm not going to run out of money when I'm 85 or something, right? So what is affordable to pass on to the next generation, if that's what you would like to do, is another interesting one to test.
100%. And then how do you structure that? If it's a gift or a loan
Yeah.
or
Then it
many
gets into
other
the whole
ways to
bank of
do
mum and
it.
dad stuff, which is a whole nother episode, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. There's all those considerations too.
Yeah. And then, yeah, around, do we gift the money to the kids? Do we save it for them? Do we pay off the mortgage? Do we pay off our investment loan? Do we invest? So again, there's lots of different opportunities that do arise. Again, coming from a sad space where there's grief and whatnot, but there's lots of different opportunities that you can look at and consider. But it all comes down to what we're prioritizing and what we're trying to achieve today, tomorrow, in 20 years' time.
Yeah. What do you think, Nick, are the biggest mistakes that people make when they receive an inheritance?
Yep. So we've at the top we said pause. So ultimately rushing into the decisions. So rushing into buying the car that maybe you can't afford once the tax has been paid and whatnot, and rushing into making those decisions is a big one. And then it comes down to again the consideration for tax and time frame of when you'll get it. Underestimating that and overcommitting yourself to something that might take a little longer to eventuate. And a big one as well, which you wouldn't really think about, I feel, is not updating your own estate planning needs.
Mm,
So if you do receive a large inheritance or any inheritance, and then it could affect your future and then what you want to leave behind to your children, your nieces, nephews, or whoever's left over when you're not here. So making sure you update that estate plan as easy as, potentially the person that passed was your executor or was your beneficiary. So they're no longer here to do that job or receive those funds. So, you want to make sure that your funds go to the person or the people or the company or the charity that you want them to go to. So
yeah,
updating that.
that's a good bit of housekeeping, a good point. I, I guess I would, I don't know if it's a mistake so much, but um, it's, inheritance sometimes can be an opportunity for a bit of a reflection yourself, a bit of a recognition that we don't live forever, and the sort of and look, I've talked about this a lot in the past in financial autonomy podcasts, but the traditional life plan of work, 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 head down, nose to the grindstone, and then somewhere in your 60s lift your head up and okay, I'm ready to travel or to do whatever, is
Mm.
actually not really an optimal life plan, because who knows what's going to happen with your health and your relationship and all sorts of bits and pieces. Um, Sometimes I find an inheritance is a good opportunity for people to just think about, gee, what is important in life, and none of us live forever, and dying with a massive balance sheet is not winning. And so, happiness is important. And I think I had a client in just earlier this week, actually, who she's got a share portfolio that she inherited from her mother. And we've made a few changes, but it's largely undisturbed. But she draws the dividends out of that. And recently they've been they're sort of moving down to the coast, so they've been fitting out a new house, new furniture, that sort of stuff. And so she's been putting the dividends towards pieces for the new home. And she was just saying she's has very much reflected on the fact that her mum would be so happy to know that this is how the money's being used, and the joy it's bringing for the whole family and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think inheritance in some ways, you want to do sensible things, absolutely, but it is also nice to do things that just make you happy. And there's someone else I know who her father died, and I think she did pay off the mortgage, the first thing she did, but the second thing she did is bought herself a Porsche, because she'd always wanted it. And, she joined the club, and she does all sorts of activities and social events and all sorts of things. And, it makes her really happy. And she's really comfortable that her dad would have been totally wrapped with her doing that. I think maybe even they might have discussed it before he passed. But in any event, yeah, so inheritance, it's not all about dry, drab, I don't know, boring, sensible stuff, right? It's a good opportunity to just think a little bit more about what makes you happy and what makes life worth living. And we don't live forever, and maybe this inheritance is an enabler for you to do some things that perhaps weren't available previous.
Yeah, 100%. That goes into honoring their legacy, buying that Porsche, as you chatted about on their last few days, or going on that trip again to Europe or whatever. So yeah, that's definitely a powerful conversation there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Nick. Well, was there anything else you wanted to cover in this week's episode on inheritances?
Uh, that's a wrap on today's episode. Obviously, if you do receive an inheritance, or one is coming and you need some assistance, you can always reach out to us. And once you've had some time to process everything and contemplate everything, we can help, see if your goals are achievable, and, help you put yourself on the right track after such a big life event has occurred. But yeah, thanks for joining me today, Paul, to chat through all of that.
Always good fun, Nick. Always good fun. And yeah, look, this is obviously an important topic. It's one that we're dealing with clients a lot. So it's certainly a highly relevant in terms of a podcast episode. And yeah, hopefully the people listening got some good information, good ideas out of it.
And thanks everyone for listening along as well. If you liked today's episode, feel free to drop us a message or share it with someone you know who might find our conversation valuable. Yeah, any questions, feel free to jump onto the guidance website and reach out. But I look forward to bringing you the next episode in a fortnight's time. Until then, have a great day.
Bye, everybody.